So the purpose today is to brief you on the assessment for this module. And there is a separate document which I will put onto Mellor today. The module handbook has some information about the assessment submission, but the main details will be in this document that I'll issue today. And I'll talk through that, and then I'll take any questions. I wouldn't expect this to take any more than an hour. Okay? So, let me just... So the first thing is, for this module, the assessment is quite simple. There is one assessment, and it's a case study report. It's 20 pages of A3. Okay, so there's no other assessment. It's one document. The dates are in the module handbook for this. And the intention is really that what the case study report does is it lets you use the knowledge and the skills that you've learnt during the course to make an assessment of an example project. Okay. So as it says here, you'll be required to complete a case study based upon an existing building. The required report of 20 A3 sides counts for 100% of the student's assessment. The report will be used to test understanding and knowledge presented in lectures and explored in workshops. Particular attention will be paid to ensuring that the student has a conceptual and practical understanding of principles of building physics for sustainable design through the evaluation of a case study building. So the important thing there is that we are testing your understanding of the principles of building physics through this case study. Now, the thing to bear in mind with this course is, as the title suggests, it's the principles of building physics. Okay, the course is not a hugely in-depth series of calculations and very sort of high-level physics analysis. That would be an MSc in its own right. So it's more about a general understanding and an understanding of the principles. The report will contain research into the case study building, your own observations, and environmental testing carried out on location. It is expected that the report will be substantially image-based with text and annotations as required. So, three things there really. We do expect you to do some background research into the case study, and that will mean using the internet, possibly using the library, using the architect's websites to find out about this building through bookwork and through internet research. We then move on to your own observations, and this is important. The case study, you have to visit the case study. So we don't just want you to build up a body of knowledge from books and from the internet. You actually have to go to the building, and you need to start using your own observations. So what that means is, both in terms of using your eyes, your ears, using your skin to feel air movement, to understand temperature, and also possibly taking some environmental meters and taking a few readings. So just to remind you that on floor 15 below us is the media unit which Peter Leahy runs. Peter Leahy holds our environmental meters, and we have some standalone light meters like I showed you when we were using the artificial sky. We also have some multimeters which have a light sensor, an acoustic probe, temperature sensor, and a relative humidity sensor. So you can borrow those. As we've also demonstrated, perfectly acceptable to use your app on your phone. And I thought that was very interesting when I don't know if you noticed this, when we were calibrating the devices here, certainly my iPhone was only sort of 2%, 1 or 2% less accurate than the full professional sound meters that we had. So they're really quite a good device. Okay, now having said that, we're not What we're not asking for is a huge body of research with you basing yourself in the project for days and days, taking readings. Okay, it's more just go and visit the project, use your eyes, use your ears, maybe take a few devices. So if, for example, you went to the building and you thought, it feels very cold in here, take a temperature probe and just test that. Test that your interpretation is actually correct. Okay? And yes, the report will be substantially image-based, so it's not a big dissertation. Okay, we expect there to be lots of drawings, lots of photographs. You might, when you make an observation, you might do a small diagram to explain it. You might use a photograph and put an arrow to point to where you were, point to what you were observing. So try and use images as best as you can. Now, as a guide, this is what the report should contain. But it is just a guide. Okay, you can put in what you like. And really what this does here is it goes through the content of the course and it just picks out some themes from each lecture as a guide to items that you might include in your report. So, aerial photos annotated to show the location. Design drawings, so plans, sections, elevations. Photographs inside and outside of the building. So I'm not expecting you to produce drawings, but ideally you'll find plans, sections, elevations of these projects, probably through the internet or through books. And yes, take your own photographs. Don't just rely on other people's photographs, which are taken on a beautiful sunny day in July, with everybody happy and the sun shining. Go on a wet day in December and take some pictures and see what it's like then. Okay. So maybe some research into the history of the project. Find out about the project. Information about the reasons for the project inception. So why did we build this building? Why is it there? If you can, find out what the briefing information provided to the architect was. So what were they told? What was their brief when they were designing this building? Project aims with respect to performance and sustainability. Now, depending on your case study, you may not find this, but if you can find, if there were particular aims for this building in terms of performance, in terms of sustainability, it'd be really useful to note that, because then you can make observations against those criteria. You can assess whether you think it's been successful. Key sustainability strategies and principles addressed in the project. So again, this will have to be done by bookwork, by research. It's very unlikely for the case studies that you're actually going to talk to the architect. Okay. Your understanding and research into how the case study responds to the context of climate change. It may be your assessment that the building does not respond to this context. This is still a valid interpretation. So the case studies, the ones that I'm suggesting range over about a 20-year period. Now, it may be your interpretation that the particular building has not addressed climate change, but it's still a valid observation, so you should still make that observation. Your understanding and research into the daylighting and solar design strategies employed in the project. You may find it useful to borrow a light meter and take sample readings in and around the building throughout the day. So again, use your eyes, use your own interpretation. Go to the building, look at the size of the windows, look at the orientation, go inside the building, make your own assessment about the space, maybe take some light meter readings, take some lux level readings. But obviously you may only visit the building once or twice, so you need to take into account, if you're taking readings on a dull day in December, that will obviously have an impact. But, take some readings. Your understanding of the building's strategy with respect to natural ventilation, wind flow and stack effect. You may wish to include your own personal evaluation of the building's performance in this respect. It is important to qualify your observations and make it clear the limited range of testing carried out. You may wish to borrow a temperature probe and take a few sample readings on your visit. So that's quite important. If you're making observations based on a single visit, you need to qualify that. So if you make a remark about, for example, I visited the building and it felt like there was very little air movement, or it felt like there was high levels of CO2. It felt stuffy in there. You may just want to qualify that by looking at the environment. Have you gone there, for example, first thing in the morning? Have you gone there on a day where there is very, very little wind? So it's only an observation, so you need to just qualify the parameters. If you were doing a longer study and you were going to go back to this building 10 times throughout the year, then you'd be getting a much better picture, but we have to do this fairly quickly. So the important thing is not to make unjustified statements. So, for example, if you made a statement that says, supposing you went to the Arts Tower, you came to this room and you said, the Arts Tower has no natural ventilation. You need to qualify that because in this instance, everybody's shut the windows. There was probably a lecture yesterday and it was noisy, so everyone's shut the windows. It doesn't mean that there is no natural ventilation, but user control, people have shut the windows. So you can comment on that. Your interpretation and possibly further research into the building's performance in terms of thermal comfort. So you note that I often refer to further research. What I mean by that is use your own observations, but if you can find out anything about the building performance, include that in the report. So if you find an article on the internet, or if you find let's say, for example, a survey of the users, although that's not research that you've gathered, you can still refer to that in the report. Obviously, a single visit can only provide a limited amount of data, and you must bear this in mind when making observations and interpretations. You may wish to describe the strategies in place in terms of thermal comfort, even though you cannot verify their performance. So what I mean by that is, you might have read about this project and you might have found a diagram or a piece of text which describes how this building is supposed to perform. So you can include that in the report, even if you've been unable on your visit to really verify it. So you can still include that, and it would need further assessment to verify it. Your assessment of the design in terms of the building's situation within its setting and neighbourhood. What design strategies have been employed in relation to context? Your interpretation and understanding of the building's strategy with regards to acoustic environments and envelopes. What are the acoustic site constraints the building has to operate within? Are there any specific acoustic requirements with regards to the internal spaces or noise sources inside the building? You may find it useful to take a sound meter or use your own mobile phone app and take readings at strategic points in and around the building at different times of the day. Provide your analysis of the results. So, with regard to acoustics, we've already performed an acoustic assessment of this building when we had the workshop and then subsequently going out onto the site. So you're familiar with that. But as always, you can use your ears. So if you go to a site and there's a particularly noisy road, you would record that as an observation. Now, ideally, you then just take a few readings and just justify that. But your ears are very good at understanding acoustics. You notice when we did the workshop in here, and Osten was multiplying the noise levels, and we had to make our own reading. When he plotted it, it showed that we were actually quite good. Our ears were quite good at understanding those noise levels. What are the specific strategies with regards to materials? Have the materials been selected with an awareness of low impact or low carbon? From your research, is there any evidence to suggest there are strategies for disassembly at the end of the building's lifespan? You may not find this out. So some of this you may find out, some of it you may not. But what you certainly can do is look at the materials that are used in the building and make your own judgments, make your own assessment of whether you feel these are low impact materials, are they sustainable, do they appear to have been carefully considered? Maybe not. The building in use. Use your own eyes and ears to make an assessment of the performance of the building in use. Are there any obvious problems the building is facing with regards to environmental performance or use? As per the examples in Professor Stevenson's lecture, are there any indications of users having to make adaptations to the building due to lack of performance? Sometimes these small-scale modifications can be very telling, e.g. doors propped open to increase ventilation. So as Professor Stevenson was showing in her lecture, sometimes these very small alterations that you see indicate that there are problems with the building's performance. And this can be incredibly useful when you go to that building, even without having to ask people. You might just see people are, let's say you go to an office and people are all wearing their coats. You think, there's something not right here. And then you can look a bit deeper. So go to your building and just use your eyes and ears, see what you can see. See how people are using it. Your overall summary of the case study with regards to environmental performance, sustainable design, and general user enjoyment and satisfaction. So don't forget that side of it, okay? A building is not sustainable if the users hate being in it, okay? Because they'll want to get rid of that building as soon as they can. So that's an important consideration when you visit the project is it a good building? Is it a pleasant environment? Is it a good place to work? Is it a place that people seem to enjoy going to? Do the acoustic environments work to help the users occupy that building? So the more sort of qualitative aspects of the assessment are very important. And I've said make reference to the precepts of sustainable design as per the module handbook. So at the back of the module handbook, there are the sort of 2 or 3 pages of precepts of sustainable design. And that will be very useful when you visit your building, when you're putting your report together. Go through the precepts and look at them and think, is my building addressing this? I'll just open those. So if you go to the back of the module handbook, you have the precepts of sustainable design. So you could go through these and make judgments about your building for each of these concepts. They may not all be relevant, but it's certainly a good start point for assessing your project. So those are in the module handbook. Okay, let's go back to our case studies. Okay, so with the case study projects, I've got 4 suggestions here, but you are free to choose any case study you want, but you must be able to visit it. Okay, and you must be able to visit it over the next 2 months. So it should not be something that you visited 6 years ago. Okay, it's got to be something that you can actually go now, having done the course. Okay, it doesn't really matter what project you pick, to be honest, but ideally you'd pick something which does have an approach to sustainability. So I'll just go through the examples here, and then we'll have a little look at some of the websites for these. So the first one is the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and it's the Visitors Centre. This is a project by Field and Clegg Bradley Architects, and Field and Clegg Bradley Architects are one of the leading UK architects in terms of sustainable design. If we just go to their website, so this is the website. Field and Clegg Bradley, they were kind of pretty much leading in terms of sustainability in the UK, way before most architects were even thinking about sustainability. So they have a huge wealth of experience. This is their website, and it's referring, this is the Yorkshire Sculpture Park. I think it's a very good quality building. It certainly is a really lovely building to go to, and it seems to have achieved good standards of air quality, good internal thermal environment. Has anybody been there? No? Okay. It's a lovely day out. You can get, it's about, I think it's about 10 miles north of Sheffield on the motorway, but I'm sure there is public transport, there are buses that go there. The Yorkshire Sculpture Park is a huge park with many buildings in it, galleries in it, some wonderful sculpture. So, you know, it is a really lovely day out, apart from anything else. There's a nice cafe there. So, okay, that's one option. You'll have a nice time if you go. Okay, it's a great building. So that's one possibility. Back to my... Okay, the next one I'm sure you all know, Jessup West, down there. Jessup West is interesting. It has a double skin facade. It is in a very noisy site, and it has natural ventilation. I believe there were a few problems early on with the users complaining the ventilation wasn't working. It seems that it's settling down, and it seems now that the users quite like that building. So there's another option. It's very close. Really, really interesting example. It's a Sauerbruch Hutton, are a German architect, I believe, and I believe this cladding came over from Germany as well. So it's kind of a bit unusual for the UK in that it's a very high budget project, and perhaps pushing some ideas that we don't traditionally see in the UK. Okay. Next one, Information Commons, which you all know. Okay, this is by RMJM Architects. Oops. Sorry, I just dropped their website. So I don't know a huge amount about this project, but they seem to have some careful strategies with regards to daylight, to the window design, to the shading design. From visiting the building, it feels like a reasonable environment. Maybe it sometimes feels a little bit dark inside. I'm not sure, but often the electric lights, the artificial lights, seem to be on most of the time. So I think it's an interesting one, good one to look at. It's obviously on our doorstep just there. Okay, and then the last one, which I'm offering, is the David Mellor Cutlery factory at Hathersage. Has anyone been here? Okay. Hathersage is a small village in the Peak District, about 8 miles that direction. The train goes there, and this is an interesting project. I used to work for these architects quite a while back, and they have been interested in sustainability for quite a long time. This project has this distinctive shape. The reason for that is that they built the factory on the former foundations of a gas cylinder. So there was clearly an approach here to minimizing material usage. So rather than dig up that foundation and build a new foundation, they built this building on top of the existing one. It's a factory. It's a small cutlery factory for David Mellor Cutlery, which is very expensive, very beautiful cutlery. The quality of daylight inside is really good. Just go to the website. So this is a view from the outside. If we go inside, it has this really remarkable structure inside, which is kind of like a bicycle wheel. There's tension in those spokes, and there's a ring beam around the outside. So Hopkins architects have been around for a long time, and the quality of their work varies, but you may be familiar with the velodrome. Let me just find that. Okay, has everyone seen this project before? Yeah. This is the velodrome for the London Olympics, and I think it's a really remarkable building. Now, if you want to use this as a case study, you can. I'm only showing you this as a reference for Hopkins architects. The amazing thing about this project is they engineered it to minimize the amount of steelwork in the structure. So next door to this was Zaha Hadid's Aquatic Centre, and the figures were staggering. This building used something like 1% of the weight of steel per square metre. So they designed it to absolutely minimize the structure. Next door, Zaha Hadid, they just threw steel at that project to make that thing stand up. You know, really wasteful in terms of materials, in terms of embodied energy. But this is a real sort of triumph of architecture and engineering. Okay. So the reason I show you that is because it's the same architects who did the factory. And again, there are some of these ideas about very sort of lightweight structures to achieve a big span. On the same site is a small museum and cafe, also by Hopkins architects. Looks like this inside. And again, they're using very lightweight structures, using timber, using steel tension cables to create this very lightweight structure. So that's another possible building. Okay. If you decide to use this case study, just check on the website for David Mellor, because they run a tour of the factory. I think it might be every Sunday morning or every Sunday afternoon. So ideally you would go and visit on a day when they are opening the factory so you can go inside it. The cafe and museum is open every day to the public, but the factory is only open on specific times. Okay. It's very easy to get to. It's a 20-minute train journey followed by a 10-minute walk. And if you've not been out to the Peak District, it's in lovely scenery. Okay, lovely hills. So that's another possibility. So those are the four case studies that I'm suggesting. But you are certainly free to choose your own. Okay? So, you know, if you find something you're more interested in, by all means use that. Okay? But as I say, you must visit the building. All right? Okay, beyond that, the submission date is as per the handbook. It's I think it's the end of January. It's 20 pages. And I think that's all I have to say. So, has anyone got any immediate questions? I'm happy to, what I'll do, I'll upload this to Mole, and if you have a read of it, if you have any queries, come back to me next week with an email, and I'll try and answer the queries. But I think it's a fairly straightforward assignment. I think what I would say is when you're picking case studies, if you are going to pick a different case study, try and pick a good building. Try and pick something that you can learn from. Okay. I didn't put, there are a few other projects in Sheffield that are interesting, but I haven't put them in because they don't have public access. So it is important that you pick a project that you can go inside. Okay. And you must only go inside buildings that you have permission to go inside. Sounds obvious, but every year we have 1 or 2 students who manage to get inside buildings they shouldn't. I've done it myself as a student, where you want to see inside a building so badly, you walk in, but really you shouldn't do that. Equally, if you're taking photographs in a building, just assess the situation. More than likely, it's perfectly fine to take photographs. If you feel people may be uncomfortable, just ask for permission. Okay. Equally, if you're taking readings, just do it discreetly. Don't block the corridor taking readings. Don't take sound meters on a tripod and put them in the middle of someone's cafe. Just do handheld. Just do it discreetly. Okay. But it means really you need to stick to either public buildings or University of Sheffield buildings. Obviously, you can gain access to. If you want to do anything else, you will need to ask permission from the owner to go inside the building. If anybody, when you're in the building, if anybody challenges you or wonders what you're doing, just explain that it's a university project and you're just making a study of the building. Okay. In terms of contacting the architects, I don't expect you to do that. The architects are busy people. They probably don't want to receive lots of emails asking questions about their buildings. Some of these buildings, this building is 20 years old, so it's very unlikely that you'd be able to speak to anybody anyway. But it's up to you. I mean, sometimes a polite email to the architect saying, I'm a student at the University of Sheffield. I'd be really happy if you wouldn't mind answering these 4 questions. You might get an answer, you might not. Okay. Right, fine. Anything else? Yeah.
What is the scope of the study? While you take the light readings and acoustic readings, so how far? What's the scope? Do we confine ourselves to the public spaces, maybe, or do we try to run some office?
Yeah, you will have to stick to where you can gain public access. Also, it's not a huge study. So, for example, if you chose Jessup West, you might decide to focus mainly on the public spaces. If you manage to gain access to an office, you can take a reading. But equally, if you walk past an office and there's a window in the door, or the door's open, and you have a look how big the window is, I think it would be perfectly valid to then make a comment and say, the offices appear to have good daylighting. You might make a comment that says something like the wall-to-window ratio is about 40%, which would suggest a good level of daylight. So it could be a mixture of readings, but also just observations. And in fact, I think the most important one is observations. The difficulty with a daylight reading is it depends on the sun, what the sun's doing, if the blinds are down. So sometimes just using your eyes is just as good. But it's a good point. For your chosen case study, you don't have to assess the whole building. You may just decide to study certain areas, depending on the size of the project. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, fine. Yeah, send me any queries you have. While you're doing the project, while you're doing the work, equally drop me an email if you have any questions. All right. Okay, thanks everyone.